Claire's hand closed around the helicopter key before Adrian could touch it. The metal fob disappeared inside her pale fingers as the delivery representative stopped mid-sentence. Behind them, the helicopter's glossy black fuselage reflected white hangar lights in long, clean streaks, and the sharp smell of aviation fuel mixed with new leather drifting from the open cabin. Adrian Mercer stared at the woman standing beside the aircraft he had just paid millions for. 8 years. That was how long it had been since he had seen his ex-wife from this close. Claire wore a fitted navy coat over a cream blouse, her dark hair tucked neatly behind one ear. Nothing about her suggested she had arrived by accident. "Give me the key, Claire." His voice barely carried above the ticking of cooling metal. She looked down at the fob. "You can't fly something that belongs to me." The delivery representative glanced toward Adrian, then quickly lowered his tablet. Two executives near the hangar entrance stopped beside an untouched champagne cart. Adrian's attorney, who had come only to review the final delivery documents, stepped forward. Adrian raised one hand. "Stay back." He looked at Claire again. "Say that again." She lifted her eyes. "The helicopter is mine." No smile. No raised voice. Just 5 words delivered beneath fluorescent light, while a machine worth more than most Manhattan apartments stood between them. Adrian reached into his jacket and removed the purchase folder. The leather was smooth beneath his thumb, still carrying the faint scent of the showroom where he had selected the cabin materials himself. He opened it on a stainless steel counter. Wire confirmation, bill of sale, insurance binder, registration application. Every document carried a date from the past 3 weeks. Every dollar had come from assets accumulated years after their divorce. "I bought this personally," he said. Claire's grip tightened around the key. "I know." That answer made Adrian still. Not, "I disagree." Not, "My attorney says otherwise." She knew. Beyond the hangar doors, a turbine started somewhere on the pad, sending a low vibration through the concrete beneath his shoes. Adrian closed the folder. "Then you know our divorce settlement has nothing to do with this purchase." Claire reached into her handbag with her free hand and placed a folded legal notice beside his documents. The paper made a dry whisper against the steel. "Read it." Adrian did not. He watched her instead. 8 years earlier, Claire had walked away from a struggling husband whose aviation logistics company could barely cover payroll. Now that company occupied offices on 3 continents. Adrian's holdings were worth billions, and the first extravagant thing he had bought simply because he wanted it was sitting 20 feet away. Claire had chosen that exact object to claim. "Did you come here for money?" he asked. "No, the company?" "No." Adrian glanced at the helicopter. "Only this." Claire said nothing. The silence answered for her. Adrian finally unfolded the notice. It cited a provision from their old divorce agreement concerning aviation-related commercial interests existing before the marriage ended. His eyes moved over the language once, then returned to the date on his bill of sale. 8 years separated those documents. His attorney leaned closer. "Adrian, she can't simply take possession based on this." "I'm not taking possession," Claire said. "I'm preventing delivery." Adrian looked at the key in her hand. Then he made the first move she clearly had not expected. He turned toward the delivery representative. "Ground it." The man blinked. "Mr. Mercer?" "No flight clearance. No transfer. Nobody moves this aircraft until I authorize it in writing." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. Adrian extended his hand toward her. The key. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Claire placed it in his palm. Cold metal touched his skin. Adrian set it on top of the legal notice instead of putting it in his pocket. "You wanted my helicopter frozen," he said. "Now it is." Claire's gaze dropped to the key. Adrian closed the leather purchase folder with a quiet snap. "But tomorrow morning, you're going to sit across from me with our divorce agreement and explain how something I bought 8 years later became yours." He stepped past her toward the hangar doors, then stopped beside the black fuselage. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface, with Claire's figure visible several feet behind. Adrian turned. "And until you prove it, Claire, the only thing you own here is the claim you just made." At 9 o'clock the next morning, Claire placed their 8-year-old divorce agreement beside Adrian's helicopter key. The brass key fob made a hard click against the walnut conference table, and Adrian's eyes stayed on it as he took the chair opposite her. Pale morning light poured through the Manhattan law office windows, catching dust above the polished floor, while fresh coffee and warm printer paper scented the chilled room. Claire had brought counsel. Adrian had brought his own. But the helicopter sat grounded across town because of the two people facing each other now. Claire opened the agreement to a marked page. Section 14. Adrian did not reach for it. You had 8 years to remember Section 14. Her attorney slid the document across the table. It concerns aviation-related commercial interests established before dissolution of the marriage. Adrian read the paragraph once. The language was broad, written when Mercer Air Logistics had been a struggling company operating from 2 rented rooms near Teterboro. It covered certain pre-divorce aviation rights, options, reservations, and commercial interests that might later mature into identifiable assets. Claire touched the margin with one finger. That provision wasn't extinguished. Adrian turned several pages backward. There was the settlement he remembered more clearly. Claire had taken her share of their savings and the equity from their small apartment. She had waived any ownership interest in Mercer Air Logistics. At the time, Adrian's company carried more debt than cash, and its aviation contracts were mostly promises printed on cheap paper. He looked at her. You gave up the company. Yes. You gave up its future equity. Yes. And now that I'm worth billions, you're saying a helicopter I purchased personally 3 weeks ago somehow traveled backward 8 years into our marriage. Claire's attorney started to answer, but Claire raised her hand. I'm saying the aircraft may be connected to a commercial right that existed before the divorce. Adrian pulled his current bill of sale from a leather folder and laid it beside the old settlement. The contrast was almost absurd. One document yellowed slightly at the edges, the other crisp enough to smell of toner. My wire. My holding company. My signature. 3 weeks ago. He tapped each line. Show me where your name appears. Claire's eyes moved across the page without touching it. It doesn't. Adrian leaned back. Leather creaked beneath his shoulders. Then yesterday wasn't a misunderstanding. Silence settled beneath the low hum of the ventilation system. Claire folded her hands. Adrian looked again at the divorce papers, and for a moment the conference room seemed to shrink into the smaller one they had occupied 8 years earlier. Back then, his watch had been cheap, his company had been weeks from missing payroll, and Claire had pushed the business valuation away without asking for a second appraisal. Keep it, she had said. He remembered the scratch of her pen across the settlement and the metallic tap of her wedding ring when she placed it on the table. She had chosen cash and certainty. Adrian had chosen the company nobody could promise would survive. Now he closed the old agreement. Here's what happens next. Claire's attorney straightened. Adrian took the helicopter key from the table and placed it inside his jacket. The aircraft stays grounded today, not because I accept your claim, but because I won't move an asset while ownership is formally disputed. Claire watched him carefully. And tomorrow? Tomorrow depends on you. Adrian stood, gathering only his new purchase documents. He deliberately left the divorce agreement open between them. You have 24 hours to produce the pre-divorce commercial interest you say connects you to that specific helicopter. Claire's attorney said, That's not your deadline to impose. Adrian buttoned his jacket. No, it's my deadline before I stop handling this privately. Claire's gaze sharpened. Adrian walked toward the glass door, then turned back. 8 years ago, you signed away my company when it was worth almost nothing. 8 years later, I bought that helicopter with money earned after you were gone. He nodded toward the agreement. If one sentence in there truly makes my helicopter yours, prove it by 9 tomorrow morning. Claire slowly closed the document. And if I do? Adrian held her gaze across the cold, bright room. Then I'll honor what I signed. He opened the door. And if you don't, Claire, I'll make a court decide exactly why my ex-wife is claiming something my billions bought long after our marriage ended. By midnight, Adrian had decided the helicopter would not become a check he wrote simply to make Claire disappear. He stood alone inside the grounded aircraft at the Manhattan heliport, one hand resting on the back of a black leather seat, while recessed cabin lights cast a warm amber glow over brushed aluminum trim. Outside, maintenance carts hummed across the concrete, and the cold cabin carried the clean scent of new leather beneath the sharper trace of aviation fuel. He had chosen every detail himself, not for investors, not for Mercer Air Logistics, not because a board had approved it. The helicopter was the first thing in years Adrian had bought for no reason except that he wanted it. 8 years earlier, wanting anything had been a luxury. After Claire signed the divorce papers, Adrian had returned to 2 rented rooms near Teterboro, where the heat clicked off after dark and an aging printer shook whenever it produced an invoice. He had sold his car, taken commuter trains into Manhattan, and eaten dinners from cardboard containers beside freight schedules spread across a folding table. Claire had taken certainty. Adrian had kept Mercer Air Logistics because there had been almost nothing else to take. Then a regional carrier signed with him. Adrian reinvested every dollar. A second contract followed. Warehouses replaced rented desks. National routes replaced local ones. Aircraft logistics software became a network used across the country. The cheap watch disappeared beneath tailored cuffs. Millions became hundreds of millions, then billions. Through every acquisition, Adrian kept the same rule. The company could buy what the company needed, but his fortune would never become theater for the woman who had left before it existed. He never sent Claire newspaper profiles, never arranged a reunion, never searched for her name after midnight. So when his chief pilot had suggested purchasing a private helicopter to cut hours from Adrian's weekly travel between Manhattan and regional facilities, Adrian had surprised him. Not the company, he had said. Me. He paid personally. 3 weeks later, Claire appeared to claim it. Adrian stepped out of the cabin and closed the door with a dense metallic click. His attorney waited near the hangar office holding a tablet. "We can offer a settlement," the attorney said. "Enough money, and this probably ends before breakfast." Adrian looked through the glass toward the aircraft. White overhead lights curved across its black fuselage. "That's exactly what I'm not doing. Even if fighting costs more." Adrian turned. "Cost isn't the issue." The attorney lowered the tablet. Adrian took the helicopter key from his pocket. Cold metal pressed into his palm. 8 years ago, he had watched Claire choose the assets she believed had value and leave him with the company she believed did not. Now she was claiming something purchased entirely on the other side of that decision. If Adrian paid her merely because he could afford to, the question would remain unanswered. He walked into the operations office, where fluorescent lights buzzed above gray counters and the bitter smell of reheated coffee hung in the air. A flight release form waited beside the dispatcher's keyboard. Adrian picked it up, drew a line through tomorrow's scheduled departure, and signed beneath the cancellation. "Keep it grounded." The dispatcher nodded. "Until when?" Adrian handed the form back. "Until a judge says whose it is." His attorney looked at him. "Claire has until 9. She still does." Adrian slipped the key into his pocket. "But whether she produces anything or not, I'm done negotiating ownership in private." At 8:56 the next morning, Adrian entered his office overlooking Manhattan. Sunlight flashed against neighboring towers, and his phone vibrated across the cool stone desk. "Hey." Message from Claire appeared on the screen. "For words, we need to meet." Adrian read it once. Then he called his attorney instead. "Prepare the ownership filing." There was a pause. Even if Claire offers to settle? Adrian looked toward the distant heliport where his first personal aircraft remained motionless because his ex-wife had claimed it. Especially then. At 9:07, Claire's attorney filed the order that kept Adrian's helicopter on the ground. The notice reached his phone while he was crossing the marble lobby of Mercer Air Logistics, its screen glowing against his palm as elevator bells chimed behind him. Fresh espresso drifted from the executive cafe, and cold air rolled through the revolving doors each time someone entered from Park Avenue. Adrian stopped walking. Claire had beaten his filing by 11 minutes. His attorney's voice came through the phone. She requested temporary restraint against transfer, operation, or removal of the aircraft pending determination of her claimed interest. Adrian watched employees pass beneath the steel company logo mounted 20 feet above the lobby. "Granted. Provisionally. We have a hearing date coming." Adrian ended the call and turned around. 20 minutes later, his sedan pulled beneath the concrete canopy of the heliport. He crossed the hangar with his coat unbuttoned, shoes striking the floor in clipped echoes. The black helicopter remained exactly where he had left it. Only now a red hold placard hung from the cabin door. A laminated court notice had been clipped beneath it. Adrian stopped close enough to see his reflection broken by the white lettering. The smell of hydraulic fluid and aviation fuel sat heavy in the cool air. Somewhere behind the maintenance wall, a compressor kicked on with a metallic shudder. His chief pilot approached carrying a flight tablet. "We received the restriction electronically. I canceled your Newark meeting transfer." Adrian nodded once. "Keep every cancellation logged." "Yes, sir." Adrian reached for the red placard, then stopped before touching it. Claire had changed the fight. Yesterday, he had grounded his own helicopter voluntarily. Today, his ex-wife had placed legal authority between him and the machine his money had purchased. He took out his phone and called her. Claire answered on the fourth ring. You filed. So were you. I was filing to establish ownership. And I filed to preserve what I'm claiming until that happens. Adrian looked through the open hangar toward the skyline. Rotor noise from another helicopter swelled beyond the building, then faded toward the river. You had until 9 to show me the commercial interest. I decided a judge should see it first. Then you're done asking me to trust you. Silence. Adrian heard a faint office printer running on her end. I never asked you to trust me, Claire said. No. You walked into my delivery, took my key, and claimed an aircraft you know I purchased 8 years after our divorce. Then prove it. Adrian's jaw shifted. I intend to. He disconnected. By noon, the dispute had escaped the private rooms where Claire had tried to contain it. A business reporter called Mercer Air Logistics asking whether its billionaire founder was facing a post-divorce ownership challenge over a private helicopter. Another request arrived 6 minutes later. Adrian's communications director appeared at the hangar carrying a tablet filled with headlines. We can issue a denial. Adrian scanned one screen. Billionaire's ex-wife blocks helicopter delivery. Another asked whether Claire might have a claim on other post-divorce assets. He handed the tablet back. No attacks on her. Then what do we say? Adrian looked at the red-hulled placard. The aircraft was purchased with my personal funds 8 years after the marriage ended. Ownership will be resolved through the court. Nothing else. The director nodded and walked away. Adrian's attorney arrived carrying the hearing notice. Claire's filing forces an accelerated schedule. 48 hours. Adrian took the document. Good. Good. She wanted the helicopter frozen badly enough to put her name on a public claim. Adrian walked to the cabin door and finally lifted the red placard from its hook. He did not remove the restriction. He turned the card over and wrote the hearing date across the blank back with a black marker. Then he rehung it against the polished fuselage. No settlement calls. No buyout offers. No private resolution. His attorney studied him. You understand that means the claim, the divorce agreement, and the aircraft records all move toward open litigation. Adrian slipped the marker into his pocket. Claire made that choice when she asked the court to stop me from flying what I bought. His phone vibrated again. This time, a message from Claire filled the screen. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Adrian typed only 4 words before locking the phone. You already made it public. Then he looked at the grounded helicopter and gave his attorney the instruction that ended any possibility of retreat. Prepare everything for the hearing. Claire arrived at Adrian's office carrying a transfer agreement instead of evidence for her claim. It was 7:20 that evening, less than 38 hours before the ownership hearing. Manhattan burned gold beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, while the conference room smelled of black coffee and warm toner from the printer beside the door. Adrian stood when Claire entered. No attorney followed her. She removed her navy coat, folded it over a chair, and placed a thin document on the stone table. Sign this, and I withdraw the claim tomorrow morning. Adrian remained standing. You froze my helicopter through a court order. Yes. You put our divorce into the press. I know. And now you want a signature? Claire pushed the document toward him. The paper rasped softly across the stone. Adrian looked down. It was not a settlement payment. It was a transfer authorization for the helicopter itself. His name appeared under current owner. Beneath it sat the name of a private aviation holding company he had never dealt with. You want me to give them my aircraft? Transfer title temporarily. My claim disappears. The court restriction lifts. Adrian picked up the agreement. The pages felt fresh and slightly warm from the printer. How much are they paying? Nothing. He looked at her. So after 8 years, you claim a helicopter I bought with my own billions, ground it, drag me toward court, then ask me to hand it to strangers for free. Claire's fingers tightened around the back of the chair. You can buy another one. Adrian let the sentence hang between them. Outside the glass, a helicopter crossed the Hudson, its distant rotor beat fading beneath the quiet hiss of the ventilation system. Adrian lowered the agreement. That's what this is to you. I didn't say that. You just did. He walked to a side cabinet and removed the purchase folder. He placed his bill of sale beside Claire's transfer document. This aircraft cost me millions. But that isn't why I'm keeping it. Claire looked at the two sets of papers. Then why? Because it's mine. Adrian tapped the closing date. Bought 3 weeks ago. 8 years after you stopped being my wife. Claire drew a slow breath through her nose. Adrian, ownership isn't the problem. His hand stopped. Interesting choice of words from the woman claiming ownership. She looked toward the windows. Sign it tonight. You walk into court with no opposing claim. The helicopter leaves the hold. This ends. Adrian picked up her transfer agreement again. This time he read the recipient's name carefully. Why this company? It needs to receive the aircraft. Why? Claire said nothing. Adrian stepped around the table and placed the agreement directly in front of her. You don't want the helicopter. Her eyes lifted. You want me to move it? Silence. You could have asked me to sell it, Adrian continued. You could have demanded money. You could have tried to prove Section 14 actually gave you something. Instead, you created enough legal pressure to stop the aircraft from moving, and now you're offering to release that pressure only if I transfer it to one specific company. Claire reached for the document. Adrian moved first. He took the final signature page between both hands and tore it once down the center. The sound cracked through the room. Claire froze. Adrian tore the remaining pages, dropped them into the steel wastebasket, and pushed the basket away with his shoe. What did you do? Changed your options. Claire stepped closer. You have no idea what you're doing. Then explain it. I can't. Adrian picked up his helicopter purchase folder and tucked it beneath his arm. Then we go to court. Claire's jaw tightened. If you force this into a hearing, documents will be opened that cannot be closed again. Good. Adrian. He stopped at the conference room door. Behind him, the city lights reflected Claire's silhouette across the black glass. You came back after 8 years and claimed something my money bought after our divorce, he said. Now you're asking me to surrender it without payment, without proof, and without an explanation. He opened the door. So here's mine. No transfer, no private deal, no check. Claire stared at the torn agreement in the wastebasket. Adrian held the door open. If you want what's mine, Claire, take it in court. Claire stopped Adrian before he reached the elevator and finally told him why his helicopter mattered. The conference room door had barely closed behind them when she crossed the polished floor and pressed the elevator call button before he could. Its brass rim glowed beneath the recessed lights, while shredded pieces of her transfer agreement still showed inside the steel wastebasket behind them. Adrian looked at her hand covering the button. Move. The company in that agreement reserved your helicopter before you bought it. Adrian's eyes stayed on hers. The ventilation whispered overhead, carrying the dry smell of printer toner into the hallway. Reserved it. For 90 days. Claire removed her hand. The reservation was canceled. Then the aircraft went back onto the market. 3 weeks later, you bought it. The elevator arrived with a soft bell. Its doors opened. Adrian did not step inside. And you knew that when you walked into my delivery. Yes. The doors slid shut again between them, and their reflections disappeared from the brushed steel. Adrian turned back toward the conference room. Inside, Claire followed. He switched on only the lights above the table. The rest of the room remained dim, Manhattan glittering through the black windows, while distant horns rose faintly from 40 floors below. Adrian stood beside the torn agreement. Start with your name. Claire placed both palms against the cool stone. I'm CFO of the company that controlled the holding entity. The one you wanted me to transfer my helicopter to. Yes. Did you reserve it? Claire's thumb pressed into the table edge. The transaction went through my finance credentials. That isn't what I asked. She looked at him. No, I didn't initiate it. Adrian said nothing. Claire continued before he could interrupt. The reservation required internal authorization. My name was attached to that authorization. When I challenged it, I was told the reservation had already been canceled and the file would be archived. Then I bought the aircraft. Yes. Adrian walked toward the window. The glass felt cold beneath his fingertips. And suddenly the file couldn't disappear because the helicopter belonged to me. Claire gave a small nod. Your purchase created a new chain of title. Your attorneys would demand the earlier records if ownership was challenged. Adrian turned slowly. The shape of it was finally visible. Not another asset hunt. Not an ex-wife returning because billions had made regret expensive. Claire had deliberately attached herself to the one object whose legal history could force an old transaction into daylight. So you claim my helicopter. I needed the aircraft frozen. By pretending it belonged to you. By making the old commercial interest legally relevant. Adrian stepped closer. Then why try to transfer it back? Claire looked toward the shredded pages. Because after I filed, they gave me another option. Put the aircraft back into the holding structure, withdraw my claim, and the chain stops being examined in court. And your name? Stays on the authorization. The air conditioner clicked off. The sudden silence made the distant city sound louder. Adrian's voice dropped. They leave you holding the transaction. Claire's jaw tightened. If regulators, auditors, or a court ever examine it later, the approval trail points to me. Adrian studied her for several seconds. You could have told me at the heliport. You hadn't spoken to me in 8 years. You could have tried. Claire's eyes flicked toward him. Would the billionaire whose ex-wife just interrupted his multi-million-dollar delivery have listened before his lawyers shut the doors? Adrian did not answer. Claire picked up her coat, but instead of putting it on, she folded it over her arm. I thought I could force the transfer and survive this without dragging you further into it. By claiming something that was mine. Yes. The word came without defense. Adrian reached into his jacket and removed the helicopter key. He placed it on the table between them. The metal clicked against stone. Look at it. Claire did. That aircraft was purchased with money earned after our divorce. You have no ownership interest in it. I know. Adrian's fingers left the key. Say it again. Claire met his eyes. The helicopter belongs to you, Adrian. It always did. For 8 years, the distance between them had been measured in signatures, silence, and billions. Now one admission stripped the dispute to its core. Adrian picked up the key. Good. Claire reached for her coat. What happens now? Adrian unlocked his phone and called his attorney. Now your false claim stays alive until the hearing. Claire froze. Adrian waited for counsel to answer, then spoke without looking away from her. Do not seek dismissal. Demand the complete reservation and authorization record tied to the aircraft. He ended the call. Claire stared at him across the dim room. Adrian slipped the helicopter key back into his pocket. You used my helicopter to force the truth into court, he said. Tomorrow, we finish what you started. By sunrise, Claire's face was already beneath headlines calling her the ex-wife who came back for a billionaire's helicopter. She stood outside the Manhattan courthouse beneath hard white camera lights, one hand wrapped around the strap of her leather bag as reporters crowded the barricade. Shutters snapped in rapid bursts. Car horns bled through the street noise, and cold air carried the smell of exhaust and burnt coffee from a sidewalk cart. Ms. Mercer, are you claiming other assets? Did you know your ex-husband was worth billions before you filed? Is this about the money? Claire kept walking. She offered no denial, no explanation, not even when one reporter called. The helicopter, a multi-million-dollar divorce prize. 20 feet behind her, Adrian stepped from a black sedan and heard every word. His attorney leaned closer. We can end this before the hearing. File the purchase records, attack the credibility of her claim, ask for immediate dismissal. Adrian watched Claire disappear through the courthouse doors. No, Adrian, the public already thinks she's trying to take something she never owned. I know. Then why protect her? Adrian adjusted his cuff and started toward the entrance. I'm not protecting her claim. Inside, marble floors amplified every footstep. The air smelled of floor wax and old paper, and fluorescent lights flattened the color from the corridor walls. Claire waited beside the courtroom doors with her attorney. When Adrian approached, she did not look at him. You can still withdraw, he said. Claire's fingers tightened around her bag. So can you. It's my helicopter. Then we both know which one of us has more to lose by standing here. Adrian studied her profile. She was offering herself to the same story the cameras had already chosen. Bitter ex-wife, wealthy former husband, luxury asset. It was simple enough to fit in a headline. That simplicity was exactly what kept everyone staring at Claire instead of asking why this specific aircraft mattered. The courtroom clerk opened the doors. Claire stepped forward. Adrian caught her arm lightly above the elbow. She stopped. Once you repeat the claim in there, I'm going after the complete transaction history. Her eyes met his. I know. Not just the divorce clause. The reservation. The holding company. Every authorization attached to the aircraft before I bought it. I know. And if those records show you never owned any interest in it, your claim collapses. Claire's voice stayed low. Then let it collapse. Adrian released her arm. That answer followed him into the courtroom. 10 minutes later, Claire's attorney formally maintained her asserted interest under Section 14 of the divorce settlement. Adrian's purchase agreement rested unopened before him. He could have ended the performance by demanding the narrowest possible ruling. Instead, when his attorney rose, Adrian slid a handwritten instruction across the table. His attorney read it, paused, then looked at him. Adrian nodded. "Your Honor," the attorney said, "Mr. Mercer will not seek a private settlement, and he will not ask the court to evaluate this claim on the divorce language alone. Because Ms. Mercer asserts that her interest traces to a pre-existing aviation right, we request expedited production of the aircraft's complete transaction history before Mr. Mercer's purchase." Claire's attorney turned sharply. Across the aisle, Claire remained still. That request includes reservation agreements, holding company instructions, escrow records, internal approvals, and the authorization trail tied to the aircraft. The opposing counsel stood. "Your Honor, that goes far beyond a domestic property dispute." Adrian looked directly at Claire. For the first time, the balance had shifted. Her claim had brought his helicopter into court. His response was about to bring everything attached to that helicopter with it. The judge glanced from one table to the other. If Ms. Mercer's asserted ownership depends on a prior commercial interest, those records are relevant. Production is ordered by 8 tomorrow morning. The gavel struck once. Claire's attorney immediately leaned toward her, whispering hard enough to move the papers between them. Claire did not answer him. She looked across the aisle at Adrian instead. Outside, reporters still believed she had come for a billionaire's helicopter. Inside, Adrian had just made sure that by tomorrow morning, the court would learn why she had needed everyone to believe it. At 8:14 the next morning, Adrian's attorney placed the helicopter's complete transaction record in front of the judge. The packet landed with a dense slap against polished wood, and the courtroom fell quiet enough for Adrian to hear the ventilation rattling above the gallery. Pale daylight pressed through tall windows. The air carried the dry scent of paper, old varnish, and coffee cooling in cardboard cups behind the rail. Claire sat across the aisle in the same navy coat she had worn when she first claimed the aircraft. She kept her hands folded while her attorney formally repeated the demand. Ms. Mercer maintains that Section 14 gives her an interest in the aircraft. The judge looked toward Adrian's table. "Mr. Mercer?" Adrian's attorney started to rise. Adrian touched his sleeve. "Not yet." He stood himself. "I'm not asking you to dismiss her claim before examining what created it." Claire's attorney shifted in his chair. Adrian continued. "I'm asking that ownership be decided using the entire chain of title." The judge opened the produced records. What followed was no longer Claire's word against Adrian's. The aircraft had been reserved months earlier by the holding company Claire had identified. The reservation created no ownership. No title had transferred. The option expired. The aircraft returned to market, and 3 weeks before Claire walked into Adrian's delivery, he had purchased it with personal funds accumulated years after their divorce. His bill of sale was clean. His wire was documented. His name stood alone on the ownership paperwork. The judge turned toward Claire. "Ms. Mercer, where is your legal interest in this aircraft?" Claire rose. Her chair scraped sharply across the floor. "There isn't one, Your Honor." A murmur rolled through the gallery. Her attorney whispered her name, but Claire remained standing. Adrian did not move. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Then why did you assert one?" Adrian's attorney opened the second section of the transaction packet. "Because the prior reservation was processed under Ms. Mercer's financial authorization." He placed the authorization record on the evidence screen. Claire's name appeared beneath an electronic approval stamp. Then came the internal routing records ordered the previous day. The instructions had originated above Claire's authorization level, passed through the holding company, and been processed using credentials assigned to her office. Supporting correspondence directed that the transaction remain under her financial responsibility even though she had not initiated the reservation. Claire's employer's counsel rose immediately. "We object to characterizing internal corporate records." "Sit down," the judge said. The room went still. Adrian looked at Claire. Outside this building, she was still the ex-wife trying to take a billionaire's helicopter. Inside it, that story was collapsing page by page. The judge addressed her again. "Did you personally authorize the original reservation?" "No." "Did you benefit from it?" "No." "Did you know Mr. Mercer's later purchase was made independently?" Claire looked across the aisle. Yes. Adrian's fingers rested against the cool edge of the table. Then your ownership claim fails, the judge said. The gavel struck once. The temporary restraint is dissolved. Title remains with Mr. Mercer. Adrian's attorney exhaled beside him, but Adrian stayed seated. The helicopter was his. It had always been his. Yet Claire's employer's attorneys were now gathering documents with hurried hands, their whispered exchanges cutting through the courtroom like tearing paper. Adrian stood and picked up the title certificate. He crossed the aisle and placed it before Claire. His name appeared alone beneath owner. Claire looked at it, then at him. You could have destroyed me with this, she said quietly. No. Adrian glanced toward the authorization records still glowing on the evidence screen. I could have won the helicopter without helping you prove why you claimed it. Claire's fingers touched the edge of his title certificate, then withdrew. Adrian took it back. Across the courtroom, her employer's counsel was being instructed that the produced records would remain preserved as part of the case file. They could no longer quietly archive the transaction. They could no longer make Claire's name the only one attached to it. Claire had lost every legal claim to Adrian's multi-million-dollar aircraft, but the people who expected her to carry their transaction alone had lost something larger: control of the record. Adrian slipped the title certificate into his leather folder. The hold is gone, his attorney said. You can fly today. Adrian looked through the courthouse window toward the bright slice of Manhattan beyond it. Then he looked back at Claire, standing beside the failed claim that had brought them face to face after 8 years. Not today. He closed the folder. The first flight waited 8 years. It can wait until this ends properly. 3 weeks later, Adrian finally returned to the heliport to take the flight Claire had stopped. The black helicopter waited beneath clean white hangar lights, its polished fuselage reflecting the yellow safety lines across the concrete. The red hold placard was gone. Cool air carried the sharp scent of aviation fuel and new leather, while the turbine's rising whine vibrated faintly through Adrian's shoes. His name remained alone on the title. The court had preserved the reservation records. Claire's authorization had been separated from the instructions that originated above her, and the transaction could no longer be quietly placed on her shoulders. Claire had resigned from the company 2 days later. No settlement had given her Adrian's aircraft. No divorce clause had reached 8 years into his new fortune. The helicopter belonged exactly where the evidence said it belonged, with the man who had bought it. Adrian opened the cabin door. His hand stopped on the cool aluminum frame when footsteps sounded behind him. Claire crossed the hangar alone. No attorney. No navy coat this time. Only a charcoal jacket over a white blouse, her hair moving slightly in the rotor wash drifting through the open doors. I heard you were finally flying it, she said. Adrian glanced at the helicopter. Apparently, I'm allowed to use my own property now. Claire gave a brief smile. The judge was fairly specific. She reached into her handbag. Adrian expected another document. Instead, she placed a small brass key in his palm. Its edges were worn smooth. He recognized it immediately. The apartment. The spare, Claire said. I found it while clearing out a box. 8 years earlier, another key from that apartment had sat between them beside divorce papers. When Mercer Air Logistics was barely surviving and Adrian's future could still fit inside a rented office. He turned the old key beneath the fluorescent light. You kept this. Apparently. Claire looked toward the aircraft. I kept more of that life than I thought. The turbine note deepened outside. A crew member raised 2 fingers, signaling 5 minutes. Adrian slipped the key into his coat pocket. Your company? Former company. Claire's mouth tightened slightly. Their outside counsel retained the transaction records. My name isn't carrying the authorization alone anymore. Good. You could have taken the easy win. Adrian looked at her. I did win. Claire's gaze moved to the helicopter. You know what I mean. He did. He could have used his billions to bury her claim under attorneys, public statements, and motions until everyone remembered Claire only as the ex-wife who tried to take something she never owned. Instead, he had forced the claim far enough into daylight to prove 2 things at once. The helicopter was unquestionably his, and Claire had never been the person who created the transaction behind it. I spent a long time thinking this was what winning would look like, Adrian said. Claire glanced at the aircraft. A helicopter? You seeing what I built after you left? The words rested between them without accusation. Claire lowered her eyes to the yellow line beneath her shoes. And Adrian looked through the open cabin at the empty seat opposite his. 8 years ago, he might have imagined Claire sitting there, finally understanding what she had walked away from. Now the seat was simply empty. It did not need filling. Turns out that part doesn't matter. Claire nodded once. No apology could rebuild 8 years, and neither of them tried to manufacture one. Adrian stepped into the cabin. Claire backed beyond the safety line as the rotor accelerated, whipping cool air through the hangar and tugging at her jacket. Through the glass, Adrian lifted one hand. Claire returned the gesture. Then the helicopter rose from the pad, carrying the billionaire and the property his ex-wife had claimed into the Manhattan skyline. Below, Claire became smaller beside the hangar, but Adrian did not turn around for a second look. He had kept the helicopter. Claire had reclaimed her name, and after 8 years apart, the greatest proof of how far Adrian had risen was that he no longer needed his ex-wife to regret leaving him.